and this is still Unfiltered Conversation on Cleveland TV. Like always, Cleveland TV connects you with the rest of the world. Please don't stop signing up with us today on www.cleveland.com. My name is Frank Aidemuvia, and we're having a very interesting conversation this afternoon. And my guest is Dr. Paul Abolo. All right, Dr. Paul Abolo is the president and founder of Ecologistics Integrated USA and Nigeria. Sir, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Franca, for having me.
Yes, all right. We'll be discussing carbon credit finance and the impact of climate change to culture in Africa. Is that right, sir? We'll start with this. Nigerians and Africans, sorry about that, Africans, we've heard so much about the climate change and the greenhouse effect, and there's so much other terminologies used in your own word, in your own field. But how many percentage of Africans actually understand the impact of these terminologies? So I'd like to start with this. When you say climate change, what does that mean? And then what does it have on the environment?
Absolutely. Like you said in your opening, there is a huge gap, knowledge gap in Africa, and in fact, all over the world about climate change. Most people hear climate change without knowing exactly what is climate change. As the word depicts, the climate is changing. It's changing faster than it used to be. And people will ask, why is the climate changing? How come the climate is changing? So it's very important to understand the fundamentals of climate change. And I will try to explain it as short as possible. Climate change is caused by global warming. And global warming is caused by carbon emissions into the atmosphere. The carbon emissions into the atmosphere create what is called greenhouse gases. And the greenhouse gas is like a blanket that is wrapped over the earth. So when this blanket is wrapped over the earth, it allows the sun rays to bring in heat, pierce through it to the earth. But the rays of the sun and the heat that is not needed is trapped. It's like when you're cooking and you cover a pot, it's trapped in the earth. So the earth begins to warm up more than is necessary. So the impact of that is that when the earth begins to warm up more than is necessary, it's called global warming. And then when the global warming is there, you find that the earth begins to witness some adverse effects, such as heat waves, flooding, desertification, with all its ramifications. So you understand the progression now from carbon emission to global warming, from global warming to climate change. So this is the basics. Now, how does it affect us in Africa? Well, like I said earlier, you will find that we begin to have rains at greater intensity than we used to have, and that results to flooding. You also find that desertification, drought, you find that the coastal areas are flooded. You find that some of the water bodies, like the Lake Chad, they dry up. Lake Chad is about 10% of what it used to be. Now, what is the resultant effect of this? Poverty, hunger, food security, conflicts, a lot of stuff coupled with the fact that the population is increasing. So climate change is a very big issue that affects our existence as humans. And for Africa, it's more impactful because we have the least capacity to adapt to the impacts of climate change.
So what exactly are we supposed to be doing in Africa or as Africans to be able to adapt to the effect of climate change?
All right, great. The first of all, we need to shore up our knowledge, awareness, capacity. We need to know exactly what is climate change. We need to know exactly how climate change arises. We need to know how to adapt, which is your question. Now, to adapt to climate change, the most important thing we need is information. We need information about early warning signals. That is, for the farmers, for example, for the dwellers, they are told that this year, this is what we are going to experience as a result of climate change. We are going to have extreme weather conditions. We are going to have flood. We are going to have different kinds of climate catastrophes. So when we are aware, we can better prepare. When we are aware, we can actually relocate before the impacts get there. That is what is called adaptation, adapting to impacts of climate change. But on the other hand, there's what is called mitigation. So in climate change, you have two areas, mitigation and adaptation. Adaptation means doing things that will prevent further impacts of climate change, doing things that will prevent emissions, because like I showed you earlier, carbon emissions, global warming, and climate change. So one of those things you need to do is to reduce fossil fuel into the atmosphere, reduce the impact of cutting down trees, stop using polluting materials for your energy, and the rest of it. So that is mitigation on one side, and adaptation, which you have asked, on the other side. What do we do to adapt so that the impacts of climate change is less severe to us and our environment?
All right, you agree with me that the knowledge about what you just explained so far is not actually that much in Africa? Because let's take, for example, when you said the awareness should be created so that farmers will know exactly what to do, and even the indigents will know exactly what to do. I am aware that right here in where I stay, that NIMEX try to do one thing or the other. But how many people can actually have access to these information? And then what are people like you in the profession doing to make sure that even those at the grassroots level get to access this information?
Thank you very much. It has to go both ways, from the top where policy decisions are made, and then from the bottom, the grassroots, like you just rightly pointed out. You're putting me on the spot when you said, what are people like me doing? What we are doing is one of the things we are doing right now. We are spreading the knowledge, and then for that reason, we have also taken the green conversation into the FESTAC 2023, where we come to celebrate, but at the same time, we come to acquire knowledge. And one of the most important areas of knowledge that you need to acquire at this point in time in our life is climate change. So what we are doing is that we have created a platform at the FESTAC 2023 where we are going to share extensive knowledge on climate change. We are going to share extensive knowledge on the opportunities, the socio-economic opportunities on climate change. And then we are also going to share knowledge on what needs to be done at the grassroots. I cannot do it single-handedly, but what matters is that once I pass the knowledge gets disseminated until it gets to the grassroots. So at Arusha FESTAC 2023, we have dedicated very powerful sessions where we are going to speak with different categories of people. We are going to speak with executives. We are going to speak with government people on that as well.
I'd like to come in there, Doctor. Definitely, we are going to discuss that. We are yet to get to that, but I just want to bring that over. Let's concentrate on this regard. We're going to discuss more about your activities at Arusha or FESTAC Africa 2023. But before we get there, let's talk about climate change and then its effect on Africa's culture. Culture, we all know, is the way of life of a people. So how do climate change affect Africa and its culture?
Thank you very much. Climate change has no boundary. Climate change affects everyone, every part of the world. And then, unfortunately, Africa has contributed less than 4% to the impact of climate change. However, Africa is most impacted by climate change, and Africa has the least capacity to adapt to climate change. Now, in Africa, we find that our socioeconomic development is greatly impaired by impacts of climate change due to drought, desertification, even conflicts, resource conflicts that we have is caused partly by climate change. Now, whatever affects your life and your livelihoods affects your culture. Now, the African culture is a happy culture, a culture of inclusiveness, a culture of collaboration, a culture of love. But when means of livelihood is impaired, when we are displaced, you will find that our culture is highly impacted. And that is a big issue that is going on in Africa now. We used to have a lot of celebrations that are around our culture, the New Yam Festival, the fishing festivals, and you'll find that most of the culture that we have in Africa is linked to our lifestyle, is linked to our livelihoods. So when the impact of climate change is on our lives and our livelihoods, and you'll find that our culture invariably becomes highly impacted in a very negative way. Our cultures are attached to our celebrations. So, but when our celebrations are also attached to our well-being and our livelihoods, you'll find that whatsoever affects our livelihoods and our well-being invariably affects our culture.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. And we've discussed extensively on climate change and its effect on culture. We're going to be taking a look at the carbon markets. All right. I think most of us would have been hearing this word for the very first time, but we're not going to be in this. We'll take a short break here, and when we return, we'll discuss extensively on the carbon market and how it affects our economy. Please stay with us.
In the 21st century's technological advancement, we all seek opportunities to move and network with the emerging space. Introducing Clevenard blog and event posting. Do you think you have some interesting materials, good content, articles, and stories? Then feel free to publish them on Clevenard blog and events page, just as team of our writers are doing presently. By blogging on Clevenard's blogs and events, you benefit from our reach and network. There are constant stream of people visiting our social platform, and we have figured out just how to distribute our contents. This means you can basically skip the line and get access to a big audience from day one. Furthermore, we can help you get in touch with important people for projects with possibilities of translating your content into other languages and republishing them on Clevenard. This helps preserve and protect your content from getting lost. What's more, you also get to be part of our team with access to our network and lots of exclusives, behind-the-scenes information. And of course, you get full credit for everything you do, which brings you popularity and make extra income. Sign up now on clevenard.com and start blogging to your advantage. Please see the tutorial video on how to blog or post events on Clevenard blogs and events. For more information, contact info@clevenard.com +34 631 279811. Website www.clevenard.com. Clevenard, your blogs, your identity.
Welcome back, and we are still with Dr. Abolu. We are still discussing the effects of climate change in Africa. All right, Doctor, please, we have so much of a carbon and the carbon markets. All right, and you agree with me that not much people actually understand what this terminology is all about. What is the concept all about? At the same time, how does Africa play in this matrix?
Thank you so much, Franca, for asking that question. It's very important for us to understand what is carbon and the role that carbon plays in the climate change equation. But I would like to take you back to our earlier conversation on the impact of climate change, or how climate change started originally. Climate change is due to carbon emissions, which is the cause of global warming, and global warming the cause of climate change. Now, the United Nations Framework Convention, which is the global body that sits to decide on policies and engagement, climate action all over the world, decided in one of its sittings in Kyoto, called the Kyoto Protocol, that carbon needs to be identified and dealt with as the main cause of climate change. So at that point, carbon was now identified and decided to be managed. That when you manage the carbon, you reduce the effect of climate change, global warming and climate change. So what happened was that the world was divided into two. Geographically, you have the developed nations and you have the developing nations, such as Africa. And the market was divided into two as well. For the developed nations, we have the compliance market, and for the developing nations, you have the voluntary market. So at this point, carbon had become the currency of climate change. So at the compliance market, the industries, the factories, the power plants, everything, the carbon that they emit, fossil fuel that they emit, was now capped. A regulation was put on the carbon that was emitted. So, for example, if you have a facility where you are in the developed nations and you emit 1,000 units of carbon, for example, or carbon equivalent, as it may be described, they assess your operations and they tell you that you can only emit 500 units. So that's the cap. And for every extra unit that you emit, you have to pay a penalty, a tax, or a fine, as the case might be, because you belong to the compliance market. For the voluntary market, like we have in developing nations in Africa, our record shows that our pollution has been less than 4% that contributed to the impact of climate change. So we are not really polluting as such. So we belong to the voluntary market, which means you can decide on your own. No, there's no regulation to how much you can pollute to cut down your emission pollutions. So what happens in the compliance market is that when you pollute more than the given amount, your cap, you look for somebody who has polluted less than the cap and then purchase the difference of what they saved to offset your extra, because it will be cheaper for you to make this exchange than to pay the fines or the taxes that are associated with that extra pollution. You're getting this. So this is the structure of the carbon market. Now, your second question is how will Africa benefit from this? Now, for the compliance market, what they also do is that they create carbon projects that absorb and sink carbon, and they record it so that they can use this to offset the extra carbon. But here we are in Africa. We have abundance of forest. We are not polluting as such. Our forests and our carbon projects actually help to sink carbon or sequester carbon. Let me explain to you how that happens. With the trees, for example, the trees take in carbon dioxide and they come out with oxygen. So you'll find that the trees help to clean the environment. So if you decide in Africa not to cut down your trees for agriculture or for development, or you decide to plant trees, you can calculate the amount of carbon that is being absorbed by that initiative, and then you register it at the carbon market. Those in the compliance market who have exceeded their caps will go to the registry and purchase your carbon. So how Africa will benefit in this is that it's a huge opportunity for foreign direct investment for Africa. This is a huge opportunity for us to plant more trees. We are blessed with arable lands. We are blessed with forests. Plant more trees and even engage our existing forest resources, and begin to quantify them to know how much carbon our forest is sinking. Another dimension of this also is that you could decide to develop projects that will prevent carbon from being emitted into the atmosphere. For example, you develop an industry and you realize that rather than run your industry with a diesel-powered engine that will pollute the environment, you established a solar farm. The energy that you generate from that solar farm, which otherwise you could have generated by pouring carbon into the atmosphere, is now quantified, and the excess carbon that will have gone into the atmosphere, you now upload it to the carbon registry, where those in the compliance market who must buy your carbon to offset their extra carbon or pay huge taxes and fines will come to purchase your carbon to offset their excess. So for Africa, this is a huge opportunity. We mustn't just speak carbon and carbon market. We must understand how carbon and carbon market is linked to our economic development as well with our social development. So this is the basics about carbon markets.
Well, that's so interesting, Doctor. And I could just imagine what that could bring to or to add to the economy of Africa if it's actually leveraged on. My next question is this, okay? How can Africa then effectively engage in this carbon market, knowing fully well that we do not really have the knowledge of what to expect?
Thank you very much. Yes, Africa, I must tell you, it's not engaging because we lack the capacity to engage, we lack the understanding and the awareness. So the critical gap to bridge here is the capacity. And then the second gap to bridge is to develop the platforms. We don't have a carbon registry in Africa. You can imagine that. We don't have people who will teach us how to develop projects and programs that will help us create huge inventory of carbon savings that we can put in the market. So I might go back again to FESTAC. That is why we are insisting at the FESTAC 2023, we need to speak and teach people and create the awareness on what to do. First of all, on the values, on what to do and how to engage. This is very important, I must tell you, because I am very worried about this. I wouldn't want what's happened with the solid minerals, what happened with the oil and gas to happen again to us in Africa in terms of the carbon, where we become what is called boys. That is, we become the assistants, the servants to those who come in here into Africa to tap our carbon resources, and all we get is that we are just contractors to supply them what they need. That mustn't happen. It happened in the past, and we are determined that this will not happen. So back to what I said, we must be prepared to learn, to understand. We must be prepared to acquire the capacity. We must be prepared on the country level to develop the structures that is needed to engage in the carbon market. For example, the carbon registry. The carbon registry serves like a platform, like a warehouse where you can warehouse your carbon. And if no African country has a carbon registry, when you generate the carbon, when you produce the goods, talking about carbon right now, and you don't have an inventory, you don't have a warehouse where you put it, how will people know what you have and come to buy it? So one of the critical things we need to do, and we are prepared to get that going at Arusha, is to get commitments from different African countries to set up carbon registries. We also need to introduce Carbon Executive, which is a program for executives at different levels. And then we need to also introduce the Carbon Essentials for people at the grassroots to understand the projects and the programs they need to engage in to be able to develop a carbon that can be traded in the market. To also understand that this is a huge source of revenue for people both at corporate levels, national levels, subnational levels, local government levels, and to individuals from the private sector. This is very critical, and this is a very important thing that must be done as quick as possible.
Thank you so much. You've partially answered given answer to my next question, actually, which is what are your offerings in Arusha? But I don't know if there are still more, or there is still something you want to add to what you said already about what you are offering in regards to developing the African economy, okay, via the carbon markets.
Yes, thank you. Arusha, we have a lot to offer. And if I begin to talk about everything we have to offer in Arusha, we will exceed our time limit. But what I need to tell you for one first is that we are going to also create follow-ups. We are not just going to go and talk and create knowledge. We are going to create platforms and structures where we can actually hold hands of people who are interested and lead them towards the path where they can benefit from the carbon market. At Arusha, we are going to establish relationships and networks where we can actually help to bridge the gaps. We cannot achieve everything in one sitting or in Africa FESTAC 2023. We are also going to develop a sustainability platform where we begin to look at the sectors, key sectors where we can develop carbon projects such as energy, climate smart agriculture, transportation, industries. We are going to look at our commerce. We are going to look at aviation. We are going to look at so many things in Arusha so that, irrespective of the sector where you operate, you will find something that resonates with you through which you can benefit from this global carbon market that's out there right now. So these are some of the things we are going to offer in Arusha. And of course, we are also going to have fun the FESTAC 2023, sightseeing, music, dance, and all whatnot. But what we're going to do is that we are going to learn while we are having fun.
It is not out of place to say that Africans actually need to learn a lot about so many things and these issues. All right. Recently, in the just concluded COP27 in Egypt, you worked extensively on carbon markets and trade. All right. And then your company was appointed as an African ambassador for carbon trade in Africa. How do you intend to leverage this position to benefit Africa economy?
Yes, thank you so much for talking about COP27. COP27 was held in Egypt. This is a meeting of for 2 weeks of all the countries that are parties to the United Nations Framework Convention. It's a huge meeting held for about 2 weeks. 197 countries gather from different parts of the world, featuring about 30,000 people every day for 2 weeks, where you have to negotiate climate issues, you have to exhibit climate technology, you need to do partnerships and collaboration. So it's huge. And COP27 was held in Egypt, and we call it the African COP. We are excited that this is holding in our ground in Africa. So at COP27, we looked at Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. I won't go into details about that for now, but that deals with the money, the finance. And my firm felt that, look, why get involved with the fanfare and the negotiations and all the talk? What we really need to make climate action work for us in Africa is the finance. And the finance is attached to carbon, because carbon is the currency for climate change. So we worked extensively with several African countries, Nigeria, DRC, all of them, to emphasize the need for African countries to look at carbon market as a credible platform for foreign direct investment. So for some reasons, our work drew global attention, and the CTX and GEM at the end of COP27 decided that with our passion and effort and energy that we have put into leading Africa into the carbon market, that the firm should be the ambassador for carbon market for Africa. So what that means is, Franca, that means added responsibility. But that's a responsibility. Yeah, well, that's the responsibility we are happy to accept. And we also did a press release after that to bring in all stakeholders together. And we told the stakeholders that though we are ambassadors, each and every stakeholder is an ambassador. Franca, you're an ambassador. With what you have learned today, a little bit about carbon and climate change, we will extend our hands to you and your organizations to become ambassadors as well. And we intend that at Arusha, we are going to create more ambassadors. So what that means for us is to create the structure and the platform through which more people, more organizations, institutions, countries, and the subnational entities to effectively engage in the carbon market. And the process of this effective engagement starts with awareness. It starts with capacity building. It also goes as far as creating the structures for developing projects and programs. But besides that, we also want to ensure that by the time we go to COP28 in Dubai later this year, we should be able to report progress that have been made by African countries across sectors in terms of carbon market. So one of the things that is lacking that we are working on is to see that between now and the end of the year when we go to Dubai for COP28, Africa can say categorically that X number of carbon registries have been created in Africa. We can also say that X number of projects, carbon projects, have been developed in Africa. We'll be able to say that we have established executive education on climate change and carbon for Africa. We'll be able to say that in certain countries, we have been able to mainstream climate change considerations into the schools where it will become part of the curriculum in schools where, like you used to learn physical education, and climate education will become part of the education in schools. Because the fact is this, Franca, we cannot run away from climate change and the impact of climate change on our social and economic well-being, especially for Africa, where we have the least capacity to deal with impacts of climate change. Imagine in agriculture where people planted and they are waiting to harvest, and the rains come in and their farms are flooded, their products are destroyed, they don't have insurance, they are displaced from their homes. What do you think will be the impact on such a family? It's huge. You imagine where there's drought and people are moving southwards to graze their cattle because of impact of climate change, and they get into conflicts with other communities because of the struggle for the available natural resource. So Africa must take this very important, and we are there prepared to see how much we can do so that this gets ingrained in Africa. Even with our governments, we are also pushing that our governments begin to mainstream climate considerations in the development agenda, even in their budgetary agenda. This is very important. Now, the African Climate Change Strategy 2020 to 2030 is a document I will recommend for everyone to look and see where Africa stands with that, because there are huge global climate change policies that are on right now that we need to engage in that we don't even know about in Africa. There's this net zero program where you need to net off whatever emissions you have. The world has an ambition of 2050 target for their net zero program. Africa has 2060 as our net zero target. There's the energy transition plan that is going on. Most countries, Egypt, Nigeria, and the rest, a few more countries have developed an energy transition plan. Where do the industries fit in? Where do the sectors fit in? Where do you and I fit into these programs? We don't know. So there's a whole lot of work to do for us to know, and there's also more work to do for us to effectively engage. You know, it pains me, my heart bleeds when I see these opportunities and I see these things that needs to be done to help us to upgrade our lives and livelihoods, to help us to manage the impacts of climate change. And we just sit back. And when the impacts come, you find us going cap in hand, asking for aid, when we can actually engage climate change effectively to generate income with which we can accelerate our development and not focus on intervention. So this is my passion. This is the passion of my organization. And this is what we intend to do. And we will do it.
Wow, interesting. Seriously, I've learned so much today. But for now, we'll take a short break. And when we return, the conversation continues.
Hello there. Looking for an African movie? Search no further. Cleveland African Movies TV is here for you. We are dedicated to the acceleration of African films, TV series, documentaries, and lots more. Explore our movies at home or on the go. Cleveland Movies is free to watch on cleveland.com. Don't miss this opportunity. Hurry now. Sign up and subscribe today. Hello there. Looking for an African movie?
All right, you're welcome back to the program. It is still Unfiltered Conversation on Cleveland TV. And we are still discussing what you, as supposed, we will expect it in the upcoming events, the FESTAC Africa Destination Arusha in Tanzania. I'm still with Dr. Abolo, and we are still trying to discuss or create awareness for those that will watch this interview on climate change, on its effects in Africa. All right, sir, we went on the short break and then you're trying to explain one or two things, but let me come in here. How do we now move Africa forward, all right, in climate change action in the carbon market to be able to profit from what we stand to benefit from all this? You explain what your company wants to do, okay? What your company intends to do, but how do we generally, the government, the people, and each and every one of us come into play in this?
Beautiful. Now, we need to, on the African level, look at the global model. And the global model is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. I want to call on the African Union. I know we have developed the climate change strategy for Africa, but we need to establish a framework convention on climate change for Africa. What that means is that apart from the regular sittings at the African Union, we should have regular sittings where we can come together as a continent and look at climate change issues, like I have just discussed it, and chart a course and have a common voice at the global level on what we need to do for climate change. Now, we also need to engage from the grassroots. But let me go back to what I would call an African Climate Change Convention on Climate Change. I just thought of this right now. African Convention on Climate Change. I know we have the African Climate Week that comes in once a year, but we need to do more by having a convention, having a framework that sits together to look at all the little climate change issues and develop like what we have in the global level. What we had in the global level is something that there is a framework, there is an agreement, like you talked about the Paris Agreement of 2015, which is called the Climate Action. we should be able to come up with a climate action for Africa. We need to look at this from a holistic perspective. We need to go into this big and large. We don't need to go into this like the small people. We need to go into this like the big people we are, and then get this together, and then each country could now decide on what their targets are. Of course, on the global level, let me tell you what we are doing. When the Paris Agreement entered into the Paris Agreement, most African countries also who are signatories to the Paris Agreement were encouraged, like every other country, to send in what is called the NDCs, Nationally Determined Contributions. Now, the NDCs clearly listed what you need to do, the strategies to be able to address climate change issues. The NDCs also listed what are your emission reduction targets over a period of time, 2030, for example. So having said that, you'll find that there are clear, deliberate actions that needs to be followed. However, these actions, as stated in the NDCs, have not been distilled down effectively to reach our people at the grassroots. I don't know if you have understood the gap there. So these actions that are in these policy documents need to be broken down further to become practical, implementable actions and initiatives that will yield the desired result. So this is what I recommend that we'll do in Africa as a continent, and at different national and subnational levels.
Right. So thank you so much. Still on Arusha. We are rounding up the conversation. I just want to also give us a linkage. What is the linkage? What is the relationship between the climate change and the culture, okay, carbon emission, and then what are the participants at Arusha 2023 expecting from the events?
Very, very beautiful climate change and culture again.
When I say from the event, I mean from the workshop that you'll be having at the event.
Okay, you're talking about the workshop. Thank you so much. What we intend to do at the workshop is that we are going to help participants to see and identify the critical linkages between climate change, between climate action, because there's a difference between climate change and climate action. Climate action are those things you need to do to deal with mitigation and adaptation to climate change. So we need to understand the difference. So we need to now, at the workshop, pick up the several elements of climate action. And the participants are going to be made to identify the elements that resonate with them. And then we are going to key them up to the opportunities, the development opportunities, the business opportunities that are involved in those sectors that resonate with them. And then we are going to show them the money. We're going to show them the money in climate change. We're going to show them the co-benefits. Apart from the money, they are going to also see all the benefits that climate action is going to be to their different organizations, to their different nations, and even to their families. So when we do this, we'll find that they will go equipped with tools to work, and then we're going to create a platform, a very big support platform, where what they don't understand after they have left Arusha, they can get in back there for support. And where there are new information, we can reach out to them and say, look, there are new information. There is $100 billion that is going for XYZ projects. This is how to engage in it. There's a carbon registry that has been established in Africa. You can now develop your carbon projects and programs and key into the carbon registry to be able to inventorize your products. So the workshop is going to be huge. And then I will also tell you that the workshop is not going to just be after the FESTAC 2023, we wait till FESTAC 2024. No. Based on this, we are also going to develop regular stakeholder engagement. We are going to develop different kinds of workshops at different levels in different parts of Africa and Africa. So we are also going to help participants see how they will integrate climate actions and climate considerations into the African culture. I'll give you an example. The farming culture from where I come from allows you to farm on a particular piece of land for a number of years before going to cut a new forest before you now begin to plant. This is something we do in Africa without understanding the impact of this in climate change mitigation. So by the time we acquire knowledge and understand how this keys in effectively and favorably into climate action, the local farmer in the community will now understand. By the time we'll introduce climate smart agriculture to the local farmer, by the time we introduce that you can actually do agriculture vertically and not horizontally, you begin to see that on a given piece of land where you used to get a yield of 10 units, that yield of 10 units can be multiplied on that same piece of land to 100 units. So it's going to be a whole lot of stuff that's going to happen in Arusha, and we can actually wait for the events to come so that our people can benefit, be equipped and empowered to go out there and effectively engage in the global climate action.
Is that right? You've actually answered part of my next question, which actually happens to be my last question as well. But I will still ask it anyway, which is live. Okay, live after FESTAC Arusha 2023, and also the last tours for the government or the leadership of Africa.
Thank you so much. Life after Arusha 2023 is that we are going to take a whole lot coming out of Arusha 2023. For example, I forgot to mention that we are going to have a tree planting session at Arusha 2023. The tree planting session is going to be a model where people can now go back home knowing the importance of planting trees and empowered to plant more trees. So life after will be going home to plant more trees. Life after, for those in government and those who are in decision-making position, is to go home and develop policies that will help to plant more trees. For example, there's a culture which we have in Africa, I don't know if it's all over Africa, where when a child is born, a tree is planted for that child. We can make this a generalized African culture. So imagine our population, imagine the number of children that is born every day in Africa, and if we plant a tree for every child that is born, you can imagine the number of trees we have. And then with the knowledge that we are going to acquire, then we will know how to aggregate these trees and the carbon benefits from these trees and accelerate it and uplift it to the carbon market and then generate revenue for the entire community. So my closing statement for us is that Arusha 2023, FESTAC Africa couldn't have come at a better time. It's an opportunity, and the best time to start is now. While we are having fun, we are going to learn so that we can continue to have fun, so that we'll be empowered financially to have fun in the years to come. So I invite everyone to come to Arusha 2023, come and play and come and learn and come and see how you can make money and see how you can impact favorably in your communities and see how you can help to reduce the impact of climate change in Africa and increase our socio-economic well-being. Thank you.
Right, and we shouldn't forget to say that Arusha is actually in Tanzania, for those that's
Tanzania.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Dr. Bolo, please. I'm laughing because you didn't make mention of planting a tree for every child born in Africa. Do we still have the land to plant those trees, considering the rate at which people give birth in Africa? I don't want to answer that, please. It was just a thought. All right, thank you so much, Doctor, and thank you so much for being my guest today, for honoring this invite and giving us an insight of what we actually needs to know that we are not aware of in Africa. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
And then viewers, we wrap it up here. Till next week, we will come your way again with another interesting topic and exciting guest on this program. I remain Franca Idemudia. Do have a blessed day.